History is written by the survivors. That is why you know Denzel Washington. That is why you know Samuel L. Jackson. That is why you know Sidney Poitier. But history has a habit of burying the prototypes, and Howard Rollins was the prototype. Before Denzel could run, Howard Rollins had to walk through the fire. He was the black hope of the 1980s. He was the actor critics swore would bring home the first Best Actor Oscar since Poitier. He possessed a voice that sounded like velvet wrapped around steel, and a presence that could silence a crowded room without uttering a single word. But if you look closely at his eyes in the archival footage, you can see the fracture. This is not the standard Hollywood tragedy. This isn't just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. This is a story about the brutal, crushing weight of wearing a mask. For 6 years, Howard Rollins lived the most dangerous double life in entertainment history. By day, millions of Americans invited him into their living rooms as Virgil Tibbs on In the Heat of the Night. He was the ultimate symbol of law, order, and black dignity in the South. He was the cop who stood tall against racism. But when the director yelled, "Cut!" the officer's badge came off, and a different man emerged. By night, he was a ghost haunting the darkest corners of Louisiana and New York. He was speeding down highways at 100 miles per hour, high on crack cocaine, chasing an escape that never came. He was disappearing into secret clubs, experimenting with wigs and gowns, hiding a sexuality and a sickness that in the 1990s were considered a death sentence for a career. He had the talent to be a king, but he had the soul of a fugitive. How does a man go from an Oscar nomination to a lonely death in a hospital room at age 4, abandoned by the very industry that squeezed millions of dollars out of his talent? Was he a victim of his own vices? Or was he the collateral damage of a system that demanded black actors be perfect while refusing to treat them as human? We are going to peel back the layers of the legend. We are going to look past the mugshots and the scandals to find the brilliant, terrified boy from Baltimore who just wanted to be heard. Some stories are hard to watch. This is one of them. But it is the only way to understand the price that was paid for the black Hollywood we see today. This is the resurrection of Howard Rollins. To understand the ghost, you must first understand the soil he grew up in. And Howard Rollins did not grow up in a place that made movie stars. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1950. At that time, Baltimore was a city of steel and sweat. It was a place defined by what you could build with your hands, not what you could imagine with your mind. His mother cleaned homes for wealthy white families. His father worked the steel mills, coming home every day with the smell of iron and exhaustion clinging to his skin. There was nothing glamorous about the Rollins household. It was built on survival. It was built on the practical reality of being black and working class in America. But from the very beginning, Howard carried a frequency that didn't quite match the neighborhood. While other kids were learning to fight on the corner, Howard was learning the saxophone. He was quiet, observant. He possessed a natural, almost aristocratic grace that seemed to come from nowhere. He went to Towson State College with a sensible plan. He was going to be a teacher. It was a good job, a safe job, a job his parents could understand. Acting wasn't even a dream. It wasn't on the map. Then, one summer day, an accident changed history. Howard was working as a porter at a Sears department store. Steady work, nothing special. A friend named Frank Knox asked him to tag along to a local theater casting call. Frank wanted to impress a girl. Howard just went for the ride. He didn't know the play. He had never acted a single day in his life. He was just there to fill the room. But the director needed a body to read a few lines from Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. He pointed at Howard. Howard stepped forward. He didn't have training. He didn't have technique. He just had instinct. When he opened his mouth, the air in the room shifted. He didn't perform the lines. He inhabited them. The shyness evaporated. The stutter of the steel city disappeared. In its place was a voice of startling clarity and power. The director stared at him. The friend, Frank Knox, stared at him. In 5 minutes, Howard Rollins went from being a prop in someone else's story to being the main character of his own. He got the role on the spot. In that dusty theater room, the confusion of his youth hardened into absolute clarity. He wasn't meant to teach history. He was meant to make it. But epiphany often comes with a price. When he told his parents, they didn't applaud. They were terrified. You have to understand the context. This was the late 60s. For a black mother and father who had spent their lives scrubbing floors and melting steel just to survive, the idea of their son becoming an actor sounded like a suicide mission. They told him the brutal truth as they saw it. Black people don't become movie stars. Get a real job. Don't throw your life away chasing a fantasy designed for white people. They weren't being cruel. They were being protective. They knew how the world treated black ambition. They wanted him safe, not famous. But Howard couldn't go back, not after feeling the electricity of the stage. So he made the decision that separates the dreamers from the legends. He dropped out of college. He packed a single small bag. He took $300, every cent he had to his name, and he bought a bus ticket. He headed to New York City. No agent, no connections, no safety net. Just a raw, terrifying talent and a willingness to bleed for it. He arrived in the concrete jungle of NYC looking for a chance. What he didn't know was that he was walking into a golden era, and he was about to become its unexpected prince. New York City acts as a filter. It chews up mediocrity and spits it back out. But when Howard Rollins arrived, the city didn't chew him up. It bowed to him. Usually a young actor spends years waiting tables, handing out flyers, and begging for a single line in a commercial. Howard was different. He didn't chase the room. He held the room. Casting directors in New York noticed immediately what the folks in Baltimore had seen: a gravitational pull. He landed roles in serious productions that demanded emotional depth far beyond his 20-something years. He starred in the tense thriller We Interrupt This Program. He carried the lead in Medal of Honor Rag. He stood toe-to-toe with a young Morgan Freeman in The Mighty Gents. Critics started asking the same question, whispering it in the lobbies of theaters. Where did this kid come from? Then television noticed. He joined the cast of PBS's Our Street, becoming a recognizable face in black households across America. He was building a solid, respectable career. He was safe. He was working. But the universe had bigger plans. The role that would change his life and ultimately seal his fate was waiting in Hollywood. The movie was Ragtime. Based on the massive best-selling novel, it was one of the most anticipated films of 1981. The role of Coalhouse Walker Jr., a proud black pianist who turns into a revolutionary after suffering a racist injustice, was the most coveted part in Hollywood. Every black actor in America wanted it. When Howard walked into the audition room, he wasn't walking into an open field. He was walking into a land of giants. The waiting list included legends like Louis Gossett Jr. and cultural icons like O.J. Simpson. These were men with names, with empires, with reputations. Howard was just the kid from Baltimore with $300 in his pocket and a theater resume. He walked in, terrified. He later admitted he felt invisible next to the stars. But when the director said, "Action," the fear vanished. Howard didn't act like Coalhouse Walker. He became him. He channeled the rage of his father's generation, the dignity of the church, and the fire of the civil rights movement into a performance so quiet, yet so lethal, that the producers were stunned. He walked out of that room, convinced he had failed. He went back to his small apartment preparing to pack his bags. Then the phone rang. When they told him the role was his, Howard Rollins didn't scream. He didn't pop champagne. He fell to the floor and wept. It was the release of a lifetime of pressure, the validation that he wasn't crazy for leaving home, that he wasn't wrong to dream. And when Ragtime hit the screens, America didn't just see a movie. They saw a revelation. Howard's portrayal of Coalhouse Walker Jr. introduced a new kind of black leading man to the mainstream white audience. He wasn't a sidekick. He wasn't a comic relief. He wasn't a criminal stereotype. He was elegant. He was controlled. He was emotional without begging for sympathy, and proud without performing pride. The Academy Awards took notice. Howard received a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He was placed in the same category as Sir John Gielgud and Jack Nicholson. Hollywood had seen a spark. Now it saw a forest fire. He followed this up with a performance that cemented his place in history, portraying the slain civil rights leader Medgar Evers in For Us the Living. It earned him an OTCP Image Award, and something even more valuable, the profound respect of the black community. He was becoming the face of their history, the vessel for their heroes. By 1982, Howard Rollins was standing on top of the mountain. He was being hailed as the next Sidney Poitier. But titles like that are dangerous. They are not just compliments. They are cages. To be the next Sidney meant you had to be perfect. You had to be a saint. You had to carry the moral weight of an entire race on your shoulders every time you stepped out of your house. You couldn't make mistakes. You couldn't have bad days. And you certainly couldn't have demons. Howard Rollins had conquered New York. He had conquered Hollywood. But he was about to face an enemy that no amount of talent could outact. The silence of his own empty house. If Ragtime proved Howard Rollins could act his next masterpiece, proved he could lead. In 1984, he starred in A Soldier's Story. He played Captain Richard Davenport, a black military lawyer sent to the Deep South to investigate the murder of a black sergeant during the Jim Crow era. It was a role that required absolute authority. Look at the cast list of that movie. It is a roll call of legends: Denzel Washington, David Alan Grier, Robert Townsend, Patti LaBelle. Howard was surrounded by the most charismatic black actors of his generation. In any other hands, the character of Davenport could have been boring a stiff bureaucrat in a room full of personalities. But Howard did something extraordinary. He played Davenport with a stillness that cut deeper than any shouting ever could. He was the calm eye of the hurricane. When Denzel Washington's character was explosive and erratic, Howard was the steel wall that Denzel crashed against. He dominated the screen not by moving, but by standing his ground. But what the audience didn't know was that behind those dark aviator sunglasses, Howard was hiding a fresh wound. During the filming, his father, the steelworker, who had worried his son was chasing a foolish dream, passed away. Howard didn't quit. He didn't take a break. He took that grief, that crushing weight of loss, and he poured it into the character. The heaviness you see in Captain Davenport's eyes isn't acting. It is the real mourning of a son who realized his father would never see him reach the mountaintop. Hollywood should have opened every door for him after that performance. He should have been offered the romantic leads, the action heroes, the blockbusters. But the doors didn't swing wide. They barely cracked open. So Howard turned to the medium that would make him a household name and eventually a household tragedy. The year was 1988. The show was in the heat of the night. It was a television adaptation of the legendary film. Carroll O'Connor. The titan of TV wanted Howard specifically. He didn't want a yes man. He wanted an equal. He saw the intelligence, the dignity, and the quiet fire in Howard. And he knew, this is my Virgil Tibbs. The show became a massive hit. For the first time in his life, Howard Rollins was rich. He was famous not just in New York or LA, but in every living room in America. He was playing a black police detective in the South who refused to be disrespected by white locals. It was a powerful image. It gave hope to millions. But there was a cruel irony growing in the shadows. On screen, Howard Rollins was the ultimate symbol of the law. He was Detective Tibbs, clear-eyed, sober, disciplined. The man who put criminals in handcuffs. Off-screen, Howard Rollins was becoming the criminal. The pressure of making it didn't cure his insecurities. It fed them. The loneliness of the set, the constant scrutiny, the burden of being the perfect black role model. It all became too heavy. Instead of finding relief in his success, Howard found relief in a pipe. Crack cocaine became his escape. Alcohol became his medicine. While audiences were cheering for Detective Tibbs to solve the case, Howard was struggling to solve the chaos in his own mind. He would shoot scenes where he lectured drug dealers on morality, and then hours later, he would be driving through the back streets of Georgia looking to score the very drugs he had just condemned on camera. It was a schizophrenic existence, a split personality. And unlike in the movies where the hero always hides his secret identity in the real world, secrets have a way of exploding. The first arrest came fast. Speeding, cocaine possession, DUI. The headlines didn't just report it, they screamed it. TV cop arrested. The irony was delicious for the tabloids. They feasted on his failure. The producers were angry. The studio was terrified. But one man stood between Howard and the end of his career, Carroll O'Connor. Carroll didn't see a junkie. He saw a son. He publicly defended Howard. He fought the network executives who wanted to fire him. He told the press, Howard is fighting a disease. We don't fire people for having cancer. We shouldn't fire them for addiction. It was a noble stand. It bought Howard time. It bought him rehab. But love cannot cure addiction, and belief cannot save a man who is determined to drown. The cycle had begun, and the fall from the zenith is a long, terrifying drop. Success didn't break Howard Rollins. Life did, piece by piece. By the early 90s, the cracks in the foundation were turning into canyons. While In the Heat of the Night was pulling in millions of viewers every week, cementing Howard as a household name, his private life was hemorrhaging. We have to talk about the drug. Howard wasn't just drinking too much champagne at Hollywood parties. He was addicted to crack cocaine. And you have to understand, crack is not a social drug. It is not a drug you take to have fun with friends. It is an isolation drug. It is a drug you take when you want to turn the world off, when you want to stop the noise in your head, when you want to disappear. For Howard, the pressure of being the perfect black icon was suffocating. The drug was the only place where he didn't have to be Virgil Tibbs. He didn't have to be dignified. He could just exist. But the law doesn't care about your psychological pain. The cycle of arrests began to look like a tragic routine. 1988. Arrested for cocaine possession. 1992. Arrested for driving under the influence. 1993. Reckless driving. The humiliations were public and brutal. Here was the man playing America's smartest detective getting pulled over in real life, incoherent and terrified. The tabloids feasted on the hypocrisy. They turned his pain into a punchline. Inside the studio, a different drama was unfolding. It was the heartbreaking story of a father trying to save a drowning son. Carroll O'Connor, the legend who played Chief Gillespie, loved Howard. He truly loved him. He saw the genius, but he also saw the terrified boy from Baltimore hiding underneath. When the network executive screamed, "Fire him! He's a liability! He's costing us money!" Carroll stood in the doorway and said, "No." He threatened to quit the show if they fired Howard. He paid for rehabs. He hired private drivers to make sure Howard got to the set safely. He publicly shamed the media for kicking a man when he was down. Howard would go to rehab. He would get clean. He would return to the set looking healthy, eyes bright, promising that this time would be different. And for a few months it was. The magic would return. The chemistry was undeniable. But addiction is a patient monster. It waits in the parking lot. It waits in the lonely hotel room. The relapse always came. Late arrivals turned into no-shows. Lines were forgotten. The spark in his eyes was replaced by a glassy, distant stare. Howard was physically present, but his spirit was wandering somewhere else. The final straw broke in 1993. Another arrest. Another legal disaster. Howard was sentenced to jail time. Even Carroll O'Connor, with all his power and love, could no longer protect him. The insurance companies refused to bond him. The network refused to employ him. Howard Rollins was fired from the show that made him a star. He was replaced. The show went on without him. The machinery of Hollywood kept turning indifferent to the cog that had fallen out. Howard tried to spin it. He told interviewers he left to pursue other opportunities. He tried to keep his dignity intact. But everyone knew the truth. He was now an unemployed actor with a rap sheet, a drug reputation, and a phone that had stopped ringing. Agents who used to beg for a meeting wouldn't return his calls. Casting directors who once compared him to Poitier now saw him as a risk. He found himself scrambling for guest spots. B-movies, anything to keep the lights on. He was working, but the light inside him was flickering out. And just when he thought he had hit rock bottom, a new shadow emerged. A secret far darker and far more terrifying than addiction. The rumors began to whisper about a sickness that in the 1990s was a sentence of social death. When the cameras stopped rolling, Howard Rollins didn't just go home. He went into hiding. By the mid-90s, the rumors about Howard were no longer just about drugs. They were about something else, something that in the hyper-masculine world of Black Hollywood was considered even more dangerous than crack cocaine. People whispered that Howard was living a double life. There were reports of him appearing in clubs dressed in drag, wigs, high heels, gowns. Now the tabloids tried to paint this as a scandal. They called it bizarre behavior. They mocked him. But if we look at this through the lens of psychology, we don't see a freak. We see a fugitive. Think about the pressure he was under. Every day he had to be Virgil Tibbs, the stoic, masculine, perfect hero. He had to carry the weight of his race. He had to be strong. So when the night came, he ran to the opposite extreme. Dressing as a woman wasn't just a performance. It was a refuge. It was the only way he could walk into a room and not be Howard Rollins. It was the only way he could kill the black hope of Hollywood for a few hours and just be anonymous. It was a desperate attempt to dissociate from a reality that had become too painful to inhabit. He wasn't fighting for fame anymore. He was fighting for comfort, for breath. But there was an enemy inside him that he could not dress up and hide. The rumors of illness began to circulate. People noticed the weight falling off his frame. The sharp, handsome jawline of a soldier's story was becoming gaunt. The fire in his eyes was dimming. The whispers used the word that everyone feared in the 90s AIDS. Today we can say it. But back then, it was a scarlet letter. It was a death sentence, not just for the body, but for the legacy. To be a black man, struggling with addiction, rumors of homosexuality and AIDS, it was the trifecta of stigma. Howard denied it. To the press, to his friends, even to Carol O'Connor, he insisted it was something else. He claimed it was just cancer, just lymphoma. And in a medical sense, he was right. It was AIDS-related lymphoma. But the denial wasn't a lie. It was a shield. He knew that if he admitted the truth, the industry wouldn't just fire him. They would erase him. He was terrified that his entire body of work, Coalhouse Walker, Medgar Evers Virgil Tibbs, would be overshadowed by the virus in his blood. So he suffered in silence. He moved back to New York, the city that had once crowned him prince. But there was no homecoming parade. He lived in isolation. The phone that used to ring with offers from Spielberg or Norman Jewison was now silent. He took small roles where he could find them. He appeared in a few episodes of New York Undercover, playing a preacher. If you watch those scenes now, it is heartbreaking. You can see the frailty. You can see a man using every ounce of his remaining strength just to stand upright and deliver the lines. The talent was still there. The voice was still there. But the vessel was broken. By the autumn of 1996, at the age of 46, Howard Rollins checked into St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in Manhattan. He didn't have an entourage. He didn't have a partemis issuing statements. He was just a man alone in a sterile room, fighting a battle he had already lost. The world was busy watching new stars rise. Will Smith, Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes. The torch had been passed, but the man who lit the flame was dying in the dark. On December 8th night, the curtain fell for the last time. Howard Rollins passed away due to complications from lymphoma. He was 46 years old. The news was a whisper compared to the roar of his arrival. There were obituaries, yes. There were respectful nods. But the industry moved on with terrifying speed. To a younger generation watching this video, Howard Rollins might just be a trivia answer. A name in the credits of an old movie your parents watch. But we are here to correct the record. Howard Rollins was not a failure. He was a martyr for a specific era of Black Hollywood. He was the bridge. He stood in the gap between the pioneering era of Sidney Poitier and the superstar era of Denzel Washington. He bore the weight of the transition. He took the hits. He faced the pressure of being the first and the only in rooms that weren't designed for him to survive. Without Howard Rollins proving that a black leading man could carry a complex intellectual drama like a soldier's story, would there be a Denzel in Malcolm X? Without Virgil Tibbs commanding respect in the Deep South every week on primetime TV, would we have the diverse detectives we see on screen today? But Howard got there first, and he paid the toll. His life leaves us with a haunting lesson that is more relevant today than ever. It teaches us that talent is not a suit of armor. You can be the most gifted person in the room. You can have the critics at your feet. But if your soul is bleeding, the applause cannot save you. Greatness means nothing if a person has no place to rest. Fame means nothing if you lose yourself to find it. So how should we remember him? Do not remember him for the mugshots. Do not remember him for the tabloid headlines, or the wig, or the pipe. Those were the symptoms of his pain, not the sum of his character. Remember him as Coalhouse Walker Jr., sitting at the piano demanding justice with a dignity that could not be broken. Remember him as Virgil Tibbs, the smartest man in the room, staring down hatred without blinking. Remember him as the boy from Baltimore, who had $300 and a dream and managed to touch the stars before they burned him. Howard Rollins left the stage too soon. The throne he sat on remains empty, but the path he carved. It is crowded with the actors who walked in his footsteps. He didn't get the happy ending, but he gave us the art. And in the end, the art is the only damn thing that survives. Rest in power, Howard. You are no longer forgotten. I want to know your thoughts. Did you watch in the heat of the night growing up? Do you think Howard Rollins gets the credit he deserves today? If this story moved you, please hit the like button. It helps us tell more stories about the forgotten legends of history. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are digging deep into the archives, and you don't want to miss who we cover next. Thanks for watching.